Welcome to Life According to Adler. In this first lecture, I want to talk about one of Alfred Adler's most famous ideas, the courage to be disliked. It sounds simple, almost like a motivational slogan, something you could print on a mug or write on a poster. But in reality, it is a very serious idea, and if you actually take it seriously, it will probably make you uncomfortable. Most people encounter this phrase through the title of a popular book or through short quotes on social media. And when they hear it, they interpret it in a very predictable way. They think it means something like, just be yourself, or don't care what anyone thinks, or live your truth. But Adler was not a self-help guru, and he was not interested in catchy slogans. He was a physician, a therapist, and a thinker who spent decades working with real people and real problems. And when he talked about the courage to be disliked, he was not talking about self-expression or personal branding. He was talking about the structure of human relationships and about how most of us quietly give up our freedom without even noticing it. To understand what he meant, we have to start with something very basic, the feeling of inferiority. Every human being begins life in a state of inferiority, not as a metaphor, but as a biological and psychological reality. As children, we are small, weak, and completely dependent on others. We cannot feed ourselves, protect ourselves, or make sense of the world on our own. We rely on adults for everything. So from the very beginning, we are surrounded by people who are bigger, stronger, smarter, and more capable than we are. It is completely natural that we feel inferior in comparison. Adler did not see this as a defect. He believed the feeling of inferiority was universal and necessary. Without it, there would be no growth. A child who never felt small would never try to become bigger. A person who never felt unskilled would never try to improve. A student who never felt ignorant would never try to learn. In that sense, the feeling of inferiority is the engine of development. But something often goes wrong. Instead of using that feeling as motivation to grow, we start building our identity around it. We begin to interpret the feeling of inferiority as a permanent truth about who we are. We start to think, I am not good enough. I am not valuable. I am less than other people. And once that idea takes root, it begins to shape everything. At this point, people tend to move in one of two directions. The first direction is the superiority strategy. This person thinks, if I feel inferior, I must become superior. So they start chasing status, recognition, success, and admiration. They want to be the smartest, the most successful, the most admired person in the room. On the surface, this can look like confidence or ambition. But underneath, it is often driven by fear. Fear of being exposed, fear of being seen as ordinary, fear of being seen as inferior. The second direction is the avoidance strategy. This person thinks, if I am inferior, I should avoid situations where that might be revealed. So they don't try, they stay in the background. They avoid responsibility, challenges, and relationships. This can look like laziness or lack of motivation, but again, underneath, it is the same fear, the fear of being seen as not good enough. In both cases, life becomes organized around one central question. How do I appear in the eyes of others? Am I better than them? Am I worse than them? Do they like me? Do they respect me? Do I belong? And from this question, the need for approval is born. If you look honestly at most people's lives, a huge amount of their energy is spent trying to be liked. They want their parents to be proud. They want their partner to admire them. They want their boss to respect them. They want their friends to accept them. They want strangers online to validate them. So they adjust themselves constantly. They say what sounds right instead of what they really think. They choose careers that look impressive instead of meaningful. They stay in relationships that don't work. They hide parts of themselves, all because they are afraid of being disliked. Adler believed this was the root of most psychological suffering, not trauma, not personality, not childhood alone, but the simple fact that we are constantly living in other people's expectations. When your main goal in life is to be liked, you are not really living your life. You are performing. You wake up and ask, what will they think of this? Will they approve? Will this make me look good? You filter your decisions through the imagined reactions of other people. Your life becomes a stage, and everyone else becomes the audience. But there is a fundamental problem with this strategy. You cannot control what other people think. No matter how kind you are, someone will think you are selfish. No matter how honest you are, someone will think you are manipulative. No matter how hard you work, someone will think you are lazy. Universal approval is impossible, and if your happiness depends on being liked by everyone, you will never be free. Adler introduced a very simple but powerful idea to deal with this. He called it the separation of tasks. He suggested that in every situation we should ask a simple question: whose task is this? For example, it is your task to choose your actions. It is your task to decide your values. It is your task to work, to love, and to contribute. But whether someone likes you, whether they approve of you, whether they think you made the right choice, that is their task, not yours. Most people mix these tasks together. They try to control what others think. They try to manage other people's feelings. They try to guarantee approval. But this is impossible. You cannot live inside another person's mind. You cannot force someone to like you. You cannot ensure that everyone approves of your decisions. So when you make other people's opinions your task, you take on a burden you can never carry successfully, and that leads to anxiety, stress, and constant self-doubt. Now we can return to the idea of the courage to be disliked. The courage to be disliked is the courage to separate tasks. It is the courage to say, my task is to live according to my values. Other people's opinions about that are their task. This sounds simple, but in practice it is extremely difficult, because as soon as you start living more honestly, some people will not like it. If you set a boundary, someone will be disappointed. If you change direction in life, someone will criticize you. If you stop trying to please everyone, someone will call you selfish. And this is where courage becomes necessary. The courage to be disliked is not about being rude. It is not about ignoring others. It is about accepting that living honestly will sometimes lead to disapproval and doing it anyway. For example, imagine a person who has always tried to please their parents. They choose the career their parents want. They live the life their parents approve of. From the outside, everything looks fine. But inside, they feel empty. At some point, they realize that this is not their life. It is someone else's plan. And if they want to live honestly, they will have to disappoint their parents. That is the moment where the courage to be disliked becomes necessary. Or imagine someone in a relationship where they constantly say yes to everything. They never set boundaries. They never express their real needs, because they are afraid the other person will leave. But over time, resentment builds. And eventually, they realize that the relationship is built on fear, not honesty. If they want something real, they will have to risk conflict. They will have to risk being disliked. Again, courage is required. Adler believed that mental health requires a different orientation. Instead of asking, am I liked? Am I respected? Am I better than others? You ask, how can I contribute? What is my task here? What would be useful to others? This is what he called social interest. Social interest does not mean being nice all the time. It does not mean sacrificing yourself. It means seeing yourself as part of a larger human community. You are not the center of the universe, but you are also not worthless. You are one human among others, and your life gains meaning through contribution. When your focus shifts from how am I seen to how can I contribute, something interesting happens. You become less anxious, less self-conscious, less obsessed with your own image, because your attention is no longer stuck on yourself. You are no longer performing for an audience. You are participating in a shared task called life. And this is where the courage to be disliked becomes essential. If you focus on contribution instead of approval, some people will not like your choices, and that has to be okay, because the alternative is worse. The alternative is a life where every decision is filtered through the question, will they like this? That is not freedom. That is quiet slavery to other people's opinions. Adler believed that true freedom comes from accepting three simple facts. First, you cannot control what other people think of you. Second, your life is your task, not theirs. Third, a meaningful life is built on contribution, not approval. If you accept these three ideas, you become harder to manipulate. You become less dependent on praise, less afraid of criticism, less obsessed with status, and more focused on what actually matters: your work, your relationships, your contribution to others. So the courage to be disliked is not about rebellion, it is not about selfishness, it is not about ignoring other people, it is about accepting a simple truth. If you live honestly according to your values and focus on contribution instead of approval, some people will not like you, and that is the price of a free and meaningful life. In the coming lectures, we will go deeper into these ideas. We will talk about why your past does not define you, the difference between tasks and problems, inferiority and the need for approval, and what social interest actually looks like in everyday life. If these ideas resonate with you, subscribe to the channel, follow the short clips on Instagram and TikTok, and join the Facebook group where we discuss these concepts in more depth. This is not just about watching videos, it is about building a small community of people who are trying to live with more courage, more responsibility, and more social interest. That is life according to Adler.